Hello, RPG Maker lovers. I'm very happy to be with you guys today. A lot of the tutorials for RPG makers have focused on the Apple operating system and not so much on Windows. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to actually provide some detail work to support the deployment. I'm not going to show you the actual program itself, because obviously, if you're looking into this, you may already have the software. But what I've decided to do, which is probably much more helpful, is to kind of show you a step-by-step documentation of the entire process. It's kind of like a procedure, step-by-step procedures. And in the file, as you can clearly see, I've provided a comparison of RPG Maker MV and RPG Maker MZ. I know that everyone's aware that RPG Maker MZ is the new one, the new program, and there's still a lot of tutorials that are not available for the RPG Maker MZ. Now, obviously, RPG Maker is a great software, and most of us, most if not all of us, love the software. I would say probably that the only downside to it is not having the ability to fully test the program before you buy it. And for anybody who's interested in RPG Maker, is one of the most important thing you want to test in RPG Maker is really the deployment function and the ability to publish your game to allow other people to see it. And that's an area that I think that could still be improved for everybody that's available. So this actual tutorial is has been created to take you through from a Windows point of view, RPG Maker MV compared to RPG Maker MZ. So let's get started. When you look at my screen, there are a couple of things that you are definitely going to need if you are going to publish your games online. And just to let you know, this is really for the web browsers. RPG Maker and VM and MZ have different ways of publishing games. This specific tutorial is focusing on just the web browser function deployment. In order for you to properly provide your game online, there are a couple of things you're going to need. It's always best to try to find the easiest way possible. So other people have already provided some steps in terms of what softwares to use. So we're going to use that and piggyback off that. And then I'll give you the details in terms of what you should do to actually get them installed, test them, and write your program. So when you look at my instructions here, you'll see that there are a couple of things you will need. Obviously, you will need node.js that you probably will need to download. You will need to visit the Browse Sync IO website to basically get the naming convention for your DOS prompt. So that way you can get the browsers to synchronize. And you will need a Notepad to document some of the, to create a specific BAT application that will allow you to run the program. And obviously you will need either RPG Maker MV and RPG Maker MZ. RPG Maker MV has already provided us with detailed steps in terms of how to do it. If you actually look online, you can probably find that mostly for Apple, but you can replicate it for yourself for Windows. But what I did was I actually went through and see exactly if you replicate the same steps for MZ, how did they compare? What are the differences, and are you still able to actually get to the same end result? So the first thing I did, I downloaded node.js for both softwares, and the version I downloaded was the one that is fully functional, which is the 14.18.1. I downloaded the same version for both RPG Maker MZ as well as RPG Maker MV. After I downloaded the softwares, I installed the softwares. Just let the softwares run through by themselves. They'll do what they need to do. You don't need to make any changes to it. Just select all the applicable queries, and it should be able to run the software for you and get it installed. Once the software is done being installed, I would probably say open the browser sync IO page. And really here, you don't need much from here. It's really just this naming convention here that you're gonna, you need to make sure that it's consistent with what the command prompt and DOS is going to look at. In the specific, it's the same thing, by the way, for both MV and MZ. So there are no differences here. You just go to that website. It will have what the actual wording is for here that you should probably be aware of. And what you will do is once you have that page open, you will look at your keyboard and hold down the Windows and R in the keyword, key letter R on your keyboard. And that will allow you to actually run this part of your Windows. When that actually opens, you will type in CMD, which is obviously to open the command prompt. Both MV, both MZ follows the same process, same procedure. And these screenshots are basically showing you that's exactly what I did for both of them. After I did that part, the C prompt opened, and like I was saying before, from the browser sync IO, you can copy the information that's in that browser there and put it in your command prompt. It's the same naming mechanism that's in here, just in case it changes in the future. You just have to copy and paste it in. Either MV or MZ is the same. Once you actually copy it and paste it in, just press enter, and the command prompt will run the program. Don't mind the blue squares. That's me just hiding my personal information. So you'll see that throughout this tutorial. But you'll run the software, and once you actually run the nmp install g browser sync, it'll run the program. Let it run. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, maybe a minute or two to run. And once it's done, you can close the command prompt down, because everything you need to do for the command prompt with the information that you found on the browser sync IO, you're done with that. Now you'll need to move to the next step in the next part of the process. The next step of the process, what you're going to do is you're actually gonna go ahead and deploy your game. Both MV and MZ give you the option to deploy your game on Windows, Macs, Linux, Android, or browsers. This is what it looks like in MV for the deployment. This is what it looks like for MZ for the deployment. You can clearly see everything that's more web-based have been combined together here, with the exception of the two main, I guess you could probably say, desktop platforms, Windows and Mac being left alone. Whereas MV has all 5 of them individually listed out. So what you'll do is you'll select the web browser for MZ, and you select the web browser for MV. Decide on where you want the final published game to be created on your desktop or on your laptop, and click OK. It's always best to not select the encryptions or the exclusion of the files, just in case in the future you may need that information, or there could be a problem when you upload it. So I'll probably leave those unchecked and clicked OK. After you clicked OK, the file will be created on your desktop or laptop. This is one minor difference between the two here. This is where you start to see a few of the differences here. In MV, the file is actually created in the www folder. Now, for somebody who's trying to follow the instructions, the MV instructions that are currently available, you will have no idea what they're talking about with this www folder, especially if you're planning on purchasing or installing MZ, because in MZ, you do not get a www folder. This is only for MV. So when you actually deploy the game, you will get a full package that's going to be for MV. It's going to be in the www folder. Whereas in yours, it will not be put on a specific folder. So for example, my game that I created in MZ, I call it test 000. The one I created in MV, I call it MV test 1. In MV test 1, the www folder was stored in that main folder. In MZ, there was no additional folder created, just all the primary software folders and the apps were dumped basically in my folder here. That's one of the naming conventions you'll see that's different between MV and NZ. But obviously, when you look at it, there hasn't been too much that's changed between the softwares. It's still, you still have your typical HTML, you still have your JSON package, the audio files, the data files, the fonts, the icons, IMG and JS are still there. What have happened is the CSS and the effects were buried in other files. They've basically, for MZ, putting them on the outside, whereas in MV, they're in one of the other folders in here. So not a lot has changed from that standpoint between the two. Between MV and MZ, is just the locations of the files are a little different. So the next thing will be, once you actually have your full package, now you're going to have to create your, what I call the bat file. You just have to open Notepad. And once you open Notepad, you're going to have to go ahead and go to File, Save As, create the file first. I find that it works best that way. Create the file first by selecting Save As. Put in the name of the file. Obviously, a typical Notepad file is a TXT. So when you click Save As, you will remove everything and change the naming convention of the file to whatever the name you want to give it, and then .bat. For example, in mine, I decided to call it, for the MV file, start1.bat. Whereas for the MZ, I named it start2, I believe, .bat. And by naming with that convention, the file will change. The look of the file will change. It will go from a TXT file to a Windows batch file. If the type of file does not change to Windows batch.file, it means that you didn't save it correctly. You should try it again, which you would have to repeat the same step. Open Notepad TXT, click on File Save As. Once you've clicked on File Save As, name it and then put .bat. After you save it, it should recreate it for you. Once you actually create that file, this is very important. This is what you're going to have in Notepad that's going to automatically run your video game into the browser. So it's browser sync start server file data JS plugins and all of that. Just to kind of give you a quick example, the browser sync start basically is telling the program to go into the server within this mechanism, this grouping here, go within that file, run the data John files that's in here, run the file that are in the JS, run the plugins. So it automatically, when you double click on this Windows batch file that you've created, it will automatically run a program that will force the video game to open on the browser. That's what that does. So you need to type this into the Notepad, save it, close it. Once you close it, you'll have the actual Notepad, which is now a Windows batch file. You will have it look like this: start1 or start2 for MZ. When you double click on this, it will run the command prompt for this window batch file. And running the command prompt will actually open the basically the command prompt, and it will also open your game in the web browser, just like this. Note that in the command prompt, you will get several things. You will get the URLs, which will have the local host, and you will get a URL, which is for the externals. Because you are running this on your desktop, the video game browser will actually open in the local host. So if you look, you'll see localhost 3000, localhost 3000 here, localhost 3000, localhost 3000 here. The reason why these are the same is because I ran each of them individually, took the screenshot, shut them down, and then opened the other program and rerun the same steps and procedures to see what would happen. Assuming that I had opened both files at the same time and ran the start 1 and start 2 at the same time, the local host, the number, the 3000 number that's behind it, which is kind of the port number, that would have been different. So you would have had here, assuming that I ran MV first, it would have been 3000. MZ would not have been 3000. It would have been 3002 or 3004, something of that nature. So each time you run the start file, it recreates a different, it basically opens the video game in a different port for you to make it different. And like I said before, it's open in your local browser. There is a way for you to actually open it on the external browser, but I'm going to cover that next. So once you actually open your browser, you will be able to see a video game in the local host browser. You'll be able to move around. You can use your keyboard or you can use your mouse to control the video game and test it and play around with it and see how it works. Now, some key things to remember, we're almost done. Some key things to remember with the whole process is that when you actually run the browser here, if you're doing the external, for me, I've noticed that you have to leave the command prompt open in order for you to be able to access the external browser. So for example, if you decided to close the command prompt and then decided to type in your IP, external IP address into the web browser to see if the video game opens, it would not open. But if you leave it open and then you type this into the web browser, because this app is still running in node.js, it was able to connect with the actually application that's available. So it was able to find your actual browser, which is on the web, and connect it to your local drive and open the port for the video game. So this is basically what I did here. This is one of the parts that I mentioned earlier. What I did was I ran both video games at the same time to see what it would look like. And as I stated before, when I actually ran the video game for MZ first this time, it opened MZ in 3000 as the port, and then it opened MV as 3002, which is this here. That's basically overall the entire process. And like I said before, assuming that you want to have it available in the external browser, you actually have to have the command prompt open. And how do you do that? You click on start, double click on start, it will open the command prompt. Once it opens the command prompt, leave that alone. It will open the command prompt and it will also open your browser with the video game, but it's going to open it in localhost. Open an additional page in your browser, put in your external IP address, and you should be able to see the video game in that IP address. if you wanted to test it another way, after it actually opens the local host browser, you can close that one or override that localhost browser with your IP, your external IP. It will still open the game for you. Hopefully this was helpful. I think this was needed, especially for Windows. It took me a long time to come up with this, especially since I was not able to actually find a specific tutorial that covered this directly for Windows. So this was being able to actually put this together. I'm hoping that you're able to actually enjoy this quite a bit, and hopefully this saves you some time while you're still making the decision as to which types of software you want, whether you want MV or MZ. Hopefully this allows you to create your game and then test it on the web browser to see what it looks like so you can enjoy it. As always, if you like this tutorial, you can give me a like and also subscribe. That would be very helpful. Thanks.